Good morning. I'm the Reverend Rachael Hayes, minister of the Unitarian Universalist Society of Amherst. Welcome to you, old and new, young and old, in the Zoom and in the sanctuary. You are an essential part of our celebration today. Whether today is your first or your 1000th Sunday in our midst, we are stronger because you are with us. We are one people of many beliefs, many origins, sexualities, and genders. We are all growing, all learning, all loved. Just as you are welcome here. Today we are talking about urgency, and we are also dedicating Avery John Sex Hour and Alston Lee Sex Hour into our congregation. I am so glad that their family can be with us in person and by Zoom this morning. I call you to worship with these words. We come from radiant green, from newborn leaves reveling in spring warmth. We come from blossom and fragrance and long-awaited asparagus stalk. We come from turtles on the log and tadpoles in the shallows. We come from learning and listening. We come from the news, joyful and heartbreaking. We come from our loved ones and sometimes bring them with us. We come from this unfolding day to be here together, to celebrate new life among us and around us, to hold our joys and sorrows, to open our hearts with songs and words. We come to find one another, to remember that we are connected, that life loves life, that love holds us all. Come, let us worship together. Our chalice lighting this morning comes to us from the Reverend Christian Schmidt and Alexis Capon. We light this chalice for our children and youth and for us, celebrating the flame of faith lit in each of us, honoring the light each of us bring into the world, rejoicing in the community we create together. I know I am not the only one, but I have been waiting 2.5 years for this day. I found this piece of paper in my office recently. One of the days when we did joys and sorrows on paper, Aaliyah gave me this very joyful joy, written in crayon, and it says, "We are expecting twins in March." Of course, that would be March 2020. Annie, Allison, and Aaliyah were so excited to welcome new babies into their family. And the congregation was excited for the babies too, but right before they were born, we moved everything online because of COVID. A couple weeks into the pandemic, we heard that the babies had been born. People from our congregation brought meals and groceries and took the growing family's trash and recycling to the dump. There were precious moments of saying hi from a distance and playing outside. The twins and their moms and Aaliyah came to outdoor events on our sidewalk and to our water pouring ritual in September. We missed so much of their growing up until now, but they've been part of our heart just the same. Our faith teaches, thanks to Sophia Lyon-Fawes, that each moment a child is born is a holy moment. We revere all young children as the gift of life, of the divine, entrusted to our care. And so in this ceremony, we dedicate ourselves to be worthy of that trust. And we dedicate the children to a life that fulfills the beauty of the gift of existence. As I say the words of dedication, I will touch each of the young ones gently with the rose. For our youngest, we give them roses without thorns. An act of care and nurture, welcoming them gently to the beauty of life. And we'll touch each rose with water from nature's infinite sky, water which forever cycles through our planet, giving it life, water which touches every shore and nurtures all creation, water shared from the lives of this congregation in September's water ritual, mingled and purified. In doing so, we dedicate your lives and thoughts to the good of all humanity and to your own true growing. Annie and Allison, would you like to bring your children forward? What name shall we call this child in our community?
Alston Lee Sexauer.
Alston Lee Sexauer. May your thoughts be wise. May your lips speak truth. May your heart know love. Can you hold out your hands? And may your hands do good works all the days of your life. Oh. And what name shall we call this beloved active child?
Avery John Sexauer.
Avery John Sexauer. May your thoughts be wise. May your lips speak truth. May your heart know love. And may your hands do good works all the days of your life. Okay, Aaliyah, will you help teach Avery and Alston the principles with your words and actions?
Yes.
Do you want a rose too? Yeah. Okay. I'd like to invite all the kids up close to be Avery and Alston's community on this day. to gather around them, play with them, learn with them, and grow alongside them. Oh, it's so exciting that you can all be here for Avery and Alston. And I have a question for everyone in the religious education families, kids and adults, in the sanctuary and on Zoom. Will you support Avery and Alston as they grow? Will you be their first religious community? And now to the whole Unitarian Universalist Society of Amherst. Will you open your hearts even more to Avery, Alston, Aaliyah, and all the children of our congregation? Will you support Annie and Allison and all the parents who have committed to nurturing these beloved children and raising them to practice our 8 principles? Will you strive to be good role models for the children of our congregation? Yes. So I invite everyone present by Zoom to type your yes and words of affirmation into the chat as we welcome Avery and Alston with our applause. Spirit of life, loving God, we give thanks for this long-awaited day. May we never lose touch with the joy of this moment or the commitments that make it so sweet. Amen, and blessed be. And now let's all sit down while Avery and Alston's grandparents sing a special song.
Your children are not your children. They are the sons and the daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but they are not from you. And though they are with you, they belong not to you. You can give them your love, but not your thoughts. They have their own thoughts. They have their own thoughts. You can house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in a place of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You can strive to be like them, but you cannot make them just like you. Strive to be like them, but you cannot make them just like you. Ooh, your children are not your children. They are the sons and the daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but they are not from you. And though they are with you, they belong not to you. You can give them your love, but not your thoughts. They have their own thoughts. They have their own thoughts. You can house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in a place of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You can strive to be like them, but you cannot make them just like you. Strive to be like them, but you cannot make them just like you. Strive to be like them. Your children. Go lifted up
that was so beautiful. And I want to thank Mindy and Bill. I'm going to thank you later, but I want to thank you now for sharing your music with us on this special day. And I'm about to make a big change of pace, so let's take a breath. The earliest record of the word deadline in the English language comes from the US Civil War, from the war crimes trial of Henry Wirz. Henry Wirz was a Swiss-born American. He immigrated to the US after being convicted of embezzlement and fraud in Zurich. He worked in a factory in Lawrence, Massachusetts, and then in Western Kentucky for a while as a doctor's assistant and a homeopath. And then he came back to Massachusetts, to Northampton, to be the superintendent of a hydrotherapy clinic. He moved to Louisiana in 1854. In Louisiana, Henry Wirz worked as a plantation overseer for Levin Marshall, who owned 817 enslaved Africans among his various plantations at the beginning of the Civil War. At the beginning of the war, Wirz enlisted as a private in the Confederate Army. He was wounded with a musket ball to the arm, was sent home to recuperate, and returned to be promoted to the rank of captain and into administration of the Confederate prisoner of war camps. In 1864, the Confederacy established Camp Sumter as a military prison in Georgia at the Anderson Railroad Depot. It was a 16-acre open stockade. The Union soldiers held there until they could be exchanged for Confederate soldiers, lacked shelter, food, sanitation, medical supplies, and potable water. The imprisoned Union soldiers called it Andersonville, and the name stuck. 45,000 Union soldiers were incarcerated for some span of time at Andersonville during the 14 months it operated, and over a quarter of them died. Those who survived emerged as living skeletons. Henry Wirz was the commandant of the stockade at Andersonville for most of that time. In 1865, the US government tried him for war crimes and basically had to invent the concept of war crimes to do so. His trial was not a fair trial by our standards, more an expression of grief and outrage at the lives lost and ruined during the war, and specifically at Andersonville. The first recorded usage of the word deadline comes to us from the minutes of his war crimes trial. And he, the said Wirz, still wickedly pursuing his evil purpose, did establish and cause to be designated within the prison enclosure containing said prisoners a deadline, being a line around the inner face of the stockade or wall enclosing said prison, and about 20 feet distant from and within said stockade. And so established said deadline, which was in many places an imaginary line, in many other places marked by insecure and shifting strips of boards nailed upon the tops of small and insecure stakes or posts. He, the said Wirz, instructed the prison guard stationed around the top of the stockade to fire upon and kill any of the prisoners aforesaid who might touch, fall upon, pass over or under or across the said deadline. So the deadline was once a deadline, a line that if you crossed, you would be shot dead. By the turn of the 20th century, the word deadline was used to talk about race. Surprise, surprise. The racial deadline being the point at which the minority racialized characteristics in a person would supposedly disappear into the majority. To be clear, they were talking about a white person with 1/16 black ancestry. Within 50 years, the line was no longer in space or ancestry, but in time. The way we use the word now, an inviolable due date. The white supremacy characteristic we're holding today is not deadlines per se, but the larger sense of urgency that makes them feel life and death, even when they're not. I'd like to highlight the difference between a constant sense of urgency and things that are actually urgent or are even emergencies. Things are urgent, really, actually urgent. When you're hanging out with a diabetic and her glucose monitor starts singing its song, it's urgent that she takes care of the needs of her body. When we're faced with injustice that threatens to trample our rights or the rights of our neighbors, it's actually urgent that we confront and change those systems. But when it's just not possible to get a project done in the time we estimated, when we keep the agenda so full of deliverables that we don't remember to ask why we do what we do, when we lose track of mission, when we lose track of kindness, when we lose track of our values in the name of getting the job done, we're in the land of the not urgent and the faux urgent. This constant sense of urgency will keep us running from one thing to the next. It discourages us from reflecting on the past, connecting to our values in the present, or dreaming of the future. It perpetuates sameness, leaves no room for new ideas or collaboration. It demands that newcomers fit into the way that we already do things, rather than listening to their experience and wisdom before deciding on a course together. Urgency tells us that we don't have time to have hard conversations or really listen to one another, and we definitely don't have time to make decisions together. This is a lie. Urgency would have us live from task to task, putting off the work of relationships, covenant, mission statements, and long-range plans for the last agenda item that we never have time for. Urgency bases our schedule on external events rather than the speed we can actually go together. Those in power may even use urgency as a tactic in groups to squelch questions that could change the course of the group's work. Living with this sense of urgency may make it impossible to distinguish between things that are actually urgent and those that are not, leading to exhaustion of body, mind, and spirit, and burnout. When everything is urgent, how can we even decide what to do next? It's overwhelming. If you've been caught in this at any points in the last 2 years where so many things have felt like life and death, it is not your fault. Entire systems have been conspiring to keep us locked into this pattern. I go back to that sense of deadlines, and I allow all the baggage that was hiding inside the word to come out. Which things are actually deadlines? Which things will actually harm us or cut us off from our relationships or our values? Which things will stop us dead in a metaphorical sense, if not a literal one? Those are the things that are still urgent. There are deadlines, and there's also making peace with the fact that some things can't be rushed. If you're like me, if you have an almost visceral reaction to the idea of deadlines, it might be helpful to call up some things in your mind that happen in the time that it takes for them to happen. Avery and Alston's dedication today, long awaited and finally here, had to happen in the time that was right for it. The woods are full of Jack in the Pulpit. The tadpoles in a pond I visit are now surfacing to take sips of air. It's asparagus season. Lilacs are blooming. Any others come to mind? Lady slippers. Have you seen lady slippers yet? I haven't seen them yet. That's exciting. What else? Bleeding hearts? Yeah. Baby geese. I'm gonna check the chat to see if they've been putting stuff in the chat. Not yet. That may happen in its own time. Some things just take the time they take, even when they are urgent, especially when they are important. I'm reminded of a quote from the infinitely quotable movie, The Princess Bride. Inigo and Fezzik have just rescued the seemingly dead body of Wesley from the pit of despair and taken him to Miracle Max to see if a miracle can help. Inigo says, "We're really in a terrible rush." And Miracle Max says, "Don't rush me, Sonny. You rush a miracle man, you get rotten miracles." It is so tempting to be led by urgency instead of what's most important. Urgency will make the decisions for us if we're not pausing to discern. Finding ways to move decision-making out of this place of urgency helps us to make decisions in line with our values and be accountable to one another and all of our important relationships. Our congregation has done this in a couple interesting ways recently. After years of diligently repairing our existing cedar shingles, it became apparent that we needed to replace them. unless absolutely necessary. And we have a contractor who will work with us, which is no small feat right now, and not guaranteed to happen later if we delay. It's important, and it will take a large chunk of money that we don't have at hand. It's in hand, we're working on it. It's gonna be all right. There's a lot going on here, and a lot of people worked on this to even bring it to the congregation. The Meeting House Committee, the Finance Committee, the board, our bylaws state that we need congregational approval to make an expenditure that large. So the board set the date for a congregational meeting. They gave the congregation the information. They invited the congregation to comment on the shingle samples we received. We had the meeting, voted on the expense, just the expense, and then had a conversation about every other element of the project. Everyone who wanted to be heard had time and space to share their thoughts, either in the meeting or in conversation with the board or the survey. You see, they treated the urgent piece, the official approval, differently from the important pieces that could take up more time and did not have to be resolved that day. This is not the last time you will hear about the shingles. This is a process that will take the time it takes, with moments of urgency along the way, no doubt. But we'll want this process done well, for the good of the building and for the good of the congregation that loves it. Another place where importance has outweighed urgency. The Sunday Services Committee, in consultation with the board and in conversation with the congregation by way of a survey and just talking, has decided not to plan summer services this year. After all of the learning and growing we did, first to make Zoom services happen, and then to make simultaneous multi-platform services happen, the lay leadership of our congregation needs some time to rest and recover. They could have chosen to hold a summer full of services to make something, anything happen, to grind out 2 months of Sundays, but it was a wise choice to rest. We will share links to services from other congregations, but our Sunday Services Committee, tech directors, and Ministry of Membership and Welcome will use this time to rest, reflect, and do the sort of long-range work that is really hard to do when you're doing those urgent week-to-week things. Those are not the only examples we could lift up this morning, but they are ways we have set aside that sense of constant urgency and found a way for things to happen in the time they actually take. There's a tension between the urgent and the important. We can use this tension like a bridge to find our way through the million tasks of this life, or we can use the tension like a burden, or maybe let it use us, to keep us from looking up or resting, which will wear us out and steal our sense of direction. So, when we feel trapped by urgency, we can pause, check in with our companions, and ask whether our next steps will take us where we need to go. For our meditation today, I'll read you a poem I have come back to so many times over the last 2 years, The Peace of Wild Things by Wendell Berry. When despair for the world grows in me and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free.